Now it's time to review the major developments. I'm currently joined by international lawyer and political commentator Orhan Amashov. Let's get straight to this, Orhan. Very recently, a trilateral meeting with the participation of President of Azerbaijan Ilham Aliyev and Prime Minister of Armenia Nikol Pashinyan took place with the mediation of the President of the European Council, Michel. And after the meeting, we saw a major breakthrough. As you know, President Michel made a statement following the meeting, and there he outlined some major points like the establishment of the Border Commission, which is led by the Deputy Prime Ministers of both countries. You know, what do you think, what is the likely impact of this meeting will be?
Well, if you remember, we had a conversation before this meeting, Ilham, and I wasn't very optimistic. I was cautiously optimistic, but I wasn't unreservedly optimistic. I had my reasons, you remember, because ongoing unrest in Armenia, which is still ongoing, by the way, and the pressure exerted on the government of Nikol Pashinyan and his constant vacillation were the main reasons why I wasn't very optimistic, but I was cautiously optimistic, as I said. I think the result is plausible. I'm glad to say the result is plausible because fundamentally, this meeting has strengthened the momentum which has been slackened. You remember there was a 6 April meeting, second trilateral meeting, after which the working group was created and the border commissions were supposed to meet by the end of April, but it didn't happen. So for that reason, I think that because in peace negotiations, you need to make sure, you need to seize the opportunity. There's a momentum and it has to be strengthened. If you lose your time, then the momentum will be slackened. So that's what happened prior to 22nd May. But I'm glad to say that that momentum has been strengthened again. And it's very important that all the necessary measures are taken from now onwards. And secondly, I think that the result, but when I say result, I judge on the basis of the post-meeting statement of the European Council President. And that statement was very clear. It delineated the important matters which have been discussed and important agreements which has been reached. And I can tell you that Azerbaijan's 5-point plan is at the heart of that statement, because that statement is based on things like connectivity, which means that unblocking of the communications, the border issues, they are all integral to the interstate normalization of the relations between Azerbaijan and Armenia. And that's Azerbaijan's fundamental point, which was made clear to Armenia in February, and Armenia received it in March, if you remember. So in many ways, I think that this post-meeting statement has reinforced that March exchange. If you remember, in March, Azerbaijan made an offer, 5-point plan, and Yerevan said that there is nothing wrong about it, we can accept it, but there is also a matter to do with the fate of Karabakh Armenians. And Michel, in his post-meeting statement, said that the security and the rights of ethnic Armenian population of Karabakh must be addressed to. There's nothing wrong about the statement. It doesn't militate against Azerbaijan's fundamental point, because Azerbaijan does view those Armenians living in Karabakh as its citizens. And the important thing is that the notions, the archaic notions like Nagorno-Karabakh conflict have not been used. And I think that that's a fundamental thing we need to concentrate on. And also I have to mention that there was a fundamental, as you said, breakthrough when it comes to the matters related to border issues. For example, they were supposed to meet during April. There was another meeting in mid-May. They didn't convene. But now, 2 days after the Brussels meeting, there was a meeting on the border. Deputy Prime Ministers of Armenia and Azerbaijan participated, and we expect some tangible results further along the way.
In terms of the points outlined by the President of the European Council, how do you think Armenia will behave? Do you think it will stick with the implementation of these points, or they will show abstinence as they usually do, you know, given the great resistance in the country?
I think that's a very good question, because we have a post-meeting statement. It's very clear. The segments are there, connectivity, border demarcation, and so on. It's important that both sides work on a peace treaty, and so on. But there's a very important but, and we need to reflect on that but. As you know, Nikol Pashinyan, on the 25th of May, he was addressing the National Assembly. And he was criticized because of that construction, ethnic Armenian population of Karabakh, their rights and security. He said that during the 5-hour meeting, he and Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev did not come up with a compromise version. That's the reason why the European Union President decided to come up with a construct to which he has not agreed, the Nikol Pashinyan has not agreed. I think we need to clarify this point because it deserves clarification. Because when the mediator comes up with a post-meeting statement, it's not just a mere document where he talks about his own personal reflections. It's a compromise document. And it was compromised indeed because, as you know, during the second trilateral meeting under the auspices of the EU, this ethnic Armenian population of Karabakh issue was not included within the post-meeting statement. It's a compromise because it's an Armenian concern, but at the same time it has included there in a manner which does not militate against the interests of Azerbaijan. So for that reason, I think that we need to examine the behavior, the patterns demonstrated by Nikol Pashinyan, because Nikol Pashinyan's task is very complicated. It's not an enviable task, because effectively he has to say to the Armenian people that Karabakh is Azerbaijan and it can't be helped. But naturally, he can't say it in this outright fashion. He has to maneuver. He has to vacillate. For example, if you remember, in December, he said that there's absolutely no chance, there was no chance for Karabakh to be an independent entity outside Azerbaijan according to the OSCE peace process. And then he said that we need to we need to lower our status expectations, because that's what international community expects from Armenia. So he is playing, he's a learner. I'm not entirely sure whether he's a quick learner or not, and he is under the pressure. So on 6 April, there was a second trilateral meeting. And then when he was addressing the National Assembly, in my judgment, he crossed that liminal line. He said things which were shocking to the Armenian public. On this particular occasion, he didn't cross liminal line. He was very reserved. He vacillated. He resorted to obfuscation. But fundamental thing is that there's a post-meeting statement, and that statement is perfectly within the interest of Azerbaijan. I would say it briefly. I think that 22nd May meeting was a reasonably satisfactory success for Azerbaijan and a perfectly digestible defeat for Armenia. That's my evaluation.
Was the frequent meetings taking place in Brussels, the growing dominance of EU over the negotiation process has increased as opposed to the Moscow format, which also played a fundamental role in terms of the signing of the trilateral statement of November 10th, 2020 and the one that followed in the beginning of the 2021. Don't you think so?
Yeah, I think that Moscow is important. There's absolutely no doubt about it, because they were at the very heart of that ceasefire agreement. Russia is integral to that trilateral arrangement. But what happened in the course of the last couple of months, the Brussels importance has increased. I remember, I'm sure you remember too, when there was a first EU-mediated meeting in Brussels in mid-December, my perception was that EU was secondary to the Kremlin mediated format, because my impression was that Kremlin will be focusing on the issues like delimitation, demarcation, opening of communications, which are integral to the peace treaty, and EU would be dealing with secondary matters, well, relatively secondary matters. They're important too, of course, things like humanitarian matters and minefield maps and so on. But that has changed. I think that the crisis in Ukraine played an important role, and we need to emphasize that. And from February 2020 onwards, Brussels has muscled in, and I think that on the 6th of April, when there was a second trilateral meeting, that was the moment when we realized that Brussels is playing an important role and is almost outweighing Moscow formats. And when Azerbaijani president said that 6th April meeting was the foundation of a bilateral format, I think that speaks volumes, because as you remember, after that second trilateral meeting, there were two telephonic conversations between the foreign ministers of Armenia and Azerbaijan. A working group to do with peace treaty was established, the border commissions. So that was a foundational moment. I think that in the light of the ongoing crisis in Ukraine, and also a certain degree of predictability of the EU, the importance of Brussels will increase. That's my estimation. But of course, we shouldn't relegate Moscow to the second grade. It has been there from the very beginning. This entire post-conflict normalization architecture has Russia there, and Russia will not be removed. But Brussels' importance is increasing, and it should be mentioned in the clearest possible way.
Thank you very much, Orhan, for this interesting conversation. That was all for the week. Thank you for watching us and stay tuned not to miss the next edition of our program.